You know, there's a lot of talk right now about a potential peace deal to end the war in Ukraine. It seems to be picking up some real steam, especially after a huge, high-stakes meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. And it's got everyone wondering, right? Could this actually be it? Could this be the breakthrough we've all been hoping for? So let's dive in and really unpack what's happening behind the scenes.
A peace deal is closer than ever. Wow. I mean, that's a pretty powerful statement from Donald Trump, isn't it? It really sets the stage for what could be some of the most intense negotiations we've seen since this whole thing started. But what does that phrase, closer than ever, truly mean on the ground? You know, what are the real pressures pushing this forward? What does each side actually want? And what are the huge risks involved? That's what we're going to get into. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with this new push for peace. Then we'll look at why it's happening now, the stalemate on the battlefield. We'll also get into the competing visions for what peace even looks like. From there, we'll touch on the economic squeeze that's affecting everyone. And finally, we'll ask the biggest question of all. Could a deal like this actually create a lasting, stable peace?
All right, first up, a new push for peace. We're talking about some very high-stakes diplomacy here.
So, what's really driving all this action? Well, it turns out there's an actual, formal peace plan that Washington gave to Kyiv. It started out as a 28-point plan, and now it's apparently been whittled down to 20 points. You can think of this document as the playbook for everything that's happening right now. It's the real reason for all these urgent talks we're seeing.
So that brings up a really important question. The battlefield stalemate. Why now? Why are we talking about peace deals after all this time?
Well, to get it, you really have to understand what's happening on the ground. You've got Russia playing this long, slow, grinding game. They're basically trying to wear Ukraine down, throwing troops from all over, mercenaries, even recruits from prisons at the front lines, hoping to just exhaust Ukraine's military and, frankly, our patience in the West. But then you have Ukraine. They've built this incredible defense that some analysts are calling a meat grinder. It's this deep network of fortifications designed to inflict just massive casualties on anyone who tries to attack. And these aren't mercenaries, these are everyday citizens fighting to defend their home.
And here's what's really changed the game. Technology, specifically drones. This quote from a CSIS report really nails it. It says, heavy machinery, tanks, or troops cannot operate without the risk of facing a near-instant destruction. What they're describing is basically a 15 to 20 kilometer kill zone between the two armies, all monitored by drones. If you try to move a tank or a large group of soldiers into that zone, you're almost guaranteed to be wiped out instantly. It makes any kind of big offensive push, well, nearly impossible for either side.
Okay, so the fighting is deadlocked. That means people are finally talking. The problem is, they want completely different things. So, let's look at these competing visions for peace. What does each side actually want? And wow, this chart really lays out the problem, doesn't it? I mean, they are just worlds apart. If you look at Ukraine's column, it's all about keeping their country whole, getting strong security guarantees, and having Russian troops leave completely. But then you look at Russia's demands. They want Ukraine to give up territory, to promise to never join an alliance like NATO, and basically give Moscow a say in its future. And then there's the US, sort of stuck in the middle, trying to find a path forward. It looks like we're pushing for a ceasefire, but also nudging Ukraine towards some really tough compromises. It is an incredibly difficult balancing act.
So how do you possibly bridge a gap that big? Well, one idea that keeps coming up is something called the West German model. Now, some of you will remember this from the Cold War. West Germany joined NATO, right? But the alliance's famous security guarantee, Article 5, the one that says an attack on one is an attack on all, it didn't apply to East Germany, not until the country was reunified. The idea here is to do something similar for Ukraine. Let them join NATO, get that overall protection, but Article 5 wouldn't apply to the Russian-occupied areas, at least not at first. It's a creative, if complicated solution.
And listen to this. This isn't just some theory cooked up by diplomats. It actually has a ton of support inside Ukraine. A recent poll showed that over 70%, 7-0, of Ukrainians are on board with this West German model. Now, that is a really important number. It tells us that people there are willing to be pragmatic to find a workable solution as long as it comes with real, solid security guarantees for their future.
But you know, it's not just the fighting on the battlefield that's pushing everyone to talk. There's another huge factor at play, the economic squeeze. These are kind of the hidden levers of this war.
Let's just start with Russia. Think about this number for a second. $400 billion. That's the estimated cost of international sanctions on the Russian economy. I mean, that is just a jaw-dropping amount of money. And that doesn't even count all the foreign investment that's just vanished. We're talking about a massive, massive economic hit.
But, and this is important, the pressure is not just on Russia. Not at all. On the flip side, military aid to Ukraine dropped by 43% just this past summer. 43%. That shows you the kind of strain this war is putting on Western allies. And, of course, it puts enormous pressure on Kyiv to find a way to end this, and fast.
So let's dig a little deeper into Russia's economic problems. Economists say their economy is overheating. What that means is they're spending so much on the military that demand is just soaring, way beyond what the country can actually make. That leads to inflation, so they've had to crank interest rates all the way up to 21%. Ouch. On top of that, their national savings account is down almost 60%, and the money they make from oil and gas is dropping. So yeah, the defense factories are running 24/7, but the civilian side of the economy, the part that makes things for regular people, is really struggling. It's that classic dilemma, isn't it? Guns or butter? And right now, it's all guns.
So, you put it all together. A military stalemate where nobody can win, and economic pain on both sides. It really does sound like the perfect recipe for a peace deal, right? But that brings us to our final section, and honestly, the toughest question of all. An unstable peace. Is it even possible to get a deal that lasts?
Because really, when you boil it all down, it comes to this one thing. Are the promises credible? Can you trust them? After all the death and destruction, after everything that's happened, can either side actually believe a single word the other side says in a peace treaty?
And if you ask a lot of Ukrainians, the answer is a hard no. From where they're sitting, this deal looks like the worst possible outcome. They're being told, give up parts of your country in exchange for promises they just don't believe. There's this very deep, very real fear that Russia would just use any pause in the fighting to rearm and attack again in a few years. And you hear this a lot from them. A bad peace is not a real peace.
So that's the bottom line, isn't it? That's the ultimate question we're left with. Is this a real path to peace, or is it just a strategic trap? We know this push for a deal is coming from a place of desperation, a bloody stalemate on the ground and real economic pain at home. But is it a true chance to stop the fighting for good, or is it just a trick, a way to trade land for a fragile ceasefire that will leave Ukraine and maybe all of Europe in an even more dangerous spot down the road? That's the question hanging over every single one of these talks. And the answer, whatever it is going to define the future for a long, long time.